Hi, today we're talking about the Canon Canonet line of rangefinders. They start in 1961 with the original Canonet, and this was Canon's first entry into the intermediate market. They had only made high-end cameras or professional cameras, and so I guess in the industry there was some weariness thinking that this wouldn't go over well, but in fact the camera was a smash and sold over 1 million very, very quickly. The camera's notable as it has a very clean look, as most of the controls are on the bottom of the camera. An interesting rewind lever and a 2-button switch to open up the film door. It just has a cold shoe on the top of it. It's a 45mm f1.9 lens, and surrounding the lens is a selenium light meter. And I think that's what drew me to it. I saw this at the thrift store and I had never seen anything like it. And I don't think I've really seen another camera with a light meter exactly like this. So they ended up dropping it on the second camera as it was very expensive to produce in favor of a single CDS light meter. And that camera was the QL19 that came out in 1965. QL stands for quick loading, and I'll demonstrate how you actually can load the film. You don't have to thread it into any little slots or anything. You just put it underneath the door puts pressure on it, and it automatically advances. The next two Canonets I had came out at almost the same time, one being the QL17 G3 and the other being the Canonet 28. The Canonet 28 that I have is the 1971 and later model. They did put one out in 1968 that's almost a completely different camera, and I think it's a little more rare. The Canonet 28 is basically a cheap version of the camera. It's fully auto exposure. You have no manual override of anything. It has a cheaper lens, which is an f2.8 40mm compared to the 1.7 40mm on the QL17 G3. One way you could use the Canonet 28 and give it some kind of control though is basically by using exposure compensation by changing the ISO setting. So if you know you need to overexpose or underexpose a scene, something's backlit, you could use that, and I have done that to modify it a little bit. The QL17 has full manual override, so you could set everything yourself. Even though the light meter doesn't work in this mode, it still only works in shutter priority. But if you have an external light meter, or you just know that you need to overexpose or underexpose, you could then change the settings and do that. The camera in the shutter priority mode will actually lock you out from taking a picture that it believes is under or overexposed. The camera was also notable as you could see how much smaller it was than the last version. And at the time that was pretty unusual for a rangefinder. They also added a couple features with the quick loading, that there's a window that shows you if the film is advancing. It flickers between red and white so you know that you got the film in there right after the door is closed. There's also a window that shows you when the camera is ready to fire. It'll actually show a white or a red square. This camera will work in full manual mode without a battery, but it will not work in the shutter priority mode. The light meter won't work without the battery. One thing to know is that modern batteries do not work correctly in a camera like this. These cameras were originally designed to take mercury batteries, which were so accurate they didn't even put voltage meters in old cameras. So now if you put a modern alkaline in there, your light meter will not give you an accurate reading. So what you need to do is order some special batteries. I use a brand called Wayne Cell, and I've been using them in all my vintage cameras. They used to be a little hard to find, but now they're easy to find on Amazon. I'll even put a link below for that. The other thing I've done is I've replaced all the light seals, which I find you almost have to do with cameras from the 60s or 70s, and even a couple from the early 80s. I did make a video about how to do that, and I actually used it on this camera, so you could, I'll link that below as well. So those are 4 of the Canon Canonet rangefinders that I have in my collection. I'm out here testing out the Canonet QL17 G3. Testing it out with some stuff that I could come down here. This is a mile and a half from the studio and shoot at any time, just in case the shutter doesn't work or I didn't do a good job on the light seals. You know, you don't want to go out and do a once-in-a-lifetime trip and photograph that, fill up a bunch of rolls, and then find out you have nothing. So, but you also don't want to waste your time shooting your hand in the studio and doing some really boring stuff. So I figured this is a good in-between. If some of these shots come out, a couple might be usable. And then if not, I didn't really lose all that much. So far, the thoughts on the camera, I'm just never that crazy about rangefinders. I don't like rangefinder focusing, and this is supposed to be one of the better ones.
Maybe it's because I grew up on SLRs. Maybe people who started with rangefinders find SLRs annoying. But the reason I want to learn to use this camera is because it's so compact. And I figure it could be something I could throw in the bike bag when I want to do some analog photography when I'm out riding. And it's very quiet, and it's quiet and quick, and the lens is supposed to be sharp, so we'll find out. Shooting some Fuji Color Press 400 film. I have like 3 boxes of it. A friend gave them to me. He bought it at an estate sale for other things in the box, and so I have all this Fuji film to use, so it's a double test.
So those are 4 of the Canon Canonet rangefinders that I have in my collection. Next up in these videos, we will be talking about Minolta SLRs. See you then.